I'm joined tonight by the podcaster and education specialist Tom Bewick and the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. Thank you both. Great to have you. Andrew, do you think that we can, as Tom rightly suggests, look for optimism if we don't, first of all, take out the trash, including dealing with the misuse of language? How can we talk our way to the sunlit uplands, which we have to do with ideas and debate, if it's been co-opted by those who would only...
You're absolutely right. And we always used to say that the word is mightier than the sword. But if you misuse that word, that sword is going to get blunt pretty quickly. And you give some great examples. I mean, the word woke in and of itself, when it first came about, was all about enlightenment. This is the road to Damascus. This is about respect for others and so on and so forth. That has now become a negative. And the more that you use words in a particular way, the more they're wrongly attributed. They say that a broken bone can heal, but the wound of a word can fester forever. And the power of words, as a lawyer specialising in intellectual property, the power of words is phenomenal. But when they're misused in this way, it does a massive disservice to the things that you're supposed to be right in this world. And I think that's the big problem. I think the name-calling as well, it's too lazy, isn't it, as you say in your principle. And it's P.T. Barnum, the great showman, who always used to say, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. And what better way of starting a fight than to name-call? I mean, that's how it's happening, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with being challenged.
Yeah.
And I will take the consequences for what I say if people engage with the argument. But when I was making a point last week about the erosion of what I see as the freedoms and rights enshrined in the Constitution, and I was making the point that it had been one parliament after another for decades and centuries, that invited a journalist to infer anti-Semitism. I think it's just it's a step too far. That has to be pushed back. No. Andrew, do you feel cowed at all? Do you hear yourself not engaging in certain debates, getting involved in certain topics, simply for fear of having some sort of slanderous...
It is interesting, isn't it? Because, as you say, a lot of the words being castrated, even that word, you work on that sort of basis, the real meaning's been taken out. I don't, personally. I think I will always try and look at an alternative view in any conversation, more light, less heat. But we need to have a platform where things can be debated without fear. And some of the subjects that you touched on, people are scared to discuss them because they're scared for their lives. They've received death threats if they have certain views. And I think what happens is by abusing, it is an abuse of certain phrases in the wrong context. It devalues where you're calling out a certain injustice. And you highlighted several in your opening piece. And I think that's the problem. You're losing the power of words as a result of abusing them. And it's always freedom of speech, but it's not freedom from consequences.
It's not freedom of abuse, absolutely not.
Now, it's obviously worth saying for people that aren't familiar with Seymour Hersh, he's got a formidable reputation. I mean, he's not some Johnny-come-lately figure. He goes all the way back to the Vietnam War.
Exactly.
He broke the story about torture in Abu Ghraib. This is a serious and credible writer.
Yes, he goes right back to the My Lai massacre in 1968 in Vietnam. He discovered that the CIA was spying on anti-war activists, which forced the Senate to set up committees that looked into it and found it was perfectly true. He's got a very good record. As you mentioned, Abu Ghraib in Iraq, the Iraqi use of Iraqi prisoners by the Americans. So he's got a very good record. But he's an irascible sort of person. He's difficult to work with. He's a typical lone wolf.
Yeah, but
it doesn't go well in a newsroom.
But you want that, don't you? I mean,
of course you do. Absolutely.
You've got to have that.
How else is he going to dig? And you've got to risk offending people. You've got to be.
He's facing uphill struggle all the time. He's persistent. He's dogged, and he checks and checks and checks. I mean, he once said as a joke, "If your mother says she loves you, check it out."
Hilarious. To deal with one point, though, being so dogged as a journalist, why has he only got one source?
Well, I presume he tried to find other people. And maybe nobody was willing to, even though they were promised not to be on the record, nobody came forward. So, of course, if you want to be suspicious of his story, you jump on that point. There's only one.
Well, I think it's keeping an open mind, isn't it? And you look at that sort of balance for the alternative views and say, well, why is that the case? Why is Biden denying it? And the White House and so on and so forth.
And then the other argument that I use, who profits from the destruction of this pipeline? Certainly not the Russians.
Yeah.
And the Americans certainly do, because it's not just political. The Americans want to sell their liquefied natural gas to Europe.
Wasn't there the last significant incident was in the time of Queen Victoria?
You're quite right.
And it was an electromagnetic pulse. I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but it partially fried the telegraph system, did it not? Which was the only high-tech.
Yes, you're quite right. This is the Carrington Event in 1859, and it was an enormous flare on the surface. We haven't seen one like it on the surface since, and it threw out a lot of material, a lot of magnetic field, magnetic energy, which, because we were lucky at the time, the only electrical technology on the planet was telegraph lines. The magnetic field changing and wobbling induced currents in the telegraph lines, which electrocuted people. Nowadays, of course, we live on electricity, we live on power generation, we live on communications, and it would have affected us much more.
Well, I have mentioned this in the context of public speaking that I've done in the past, because it troubles me in my non-scientific way that we have so much invested in the cloud. You know, the server farms and all of the tech whereby everyone's life is remotely located in sensitive electronic systems. And an electromagnetic event on the scale of the Carrington event, are Google and Twitter and the rest of them future-proofed against what might happen?
Well, they say they are, in the sense that we broadly understand the parameters of the Carrington event, and that's built into the systems we've got at the moment. And since a lot of these information and storage facilities are distributed, then damage to one is not damage to everything. But as I said, we do not know what the sun could throw out on us. The Carrington event was unusual. Had it happened now, it would certainly cause a lot of damage. But we don't even know if the Carrington event is the best the sun could throw out, the biggest the sun could produce, because we've experienced the sun for only just over 100 years as an electronic society. So you're quite right to express fears that severe damage could be caused to what we take as normal and rely on due to solar weather.
It very much interests me that we live in a solar system. We know it and understand it as the solar system. And when it comes to, say, talk about the way in which our planet warms and cools, I don't think there's ever adequate consideration given to the fact that we live and die by the sun, which is 99% of the solar system. And we don't seem to fully understand what it's capable of.
Well, that's right. I mean, the sun is the energy for planet Earth. I mean, without the sun, nothing happens. It powers everything. It powers weather, climate, living systems, absolutely everything. It's energy coming from above. And we understand a great deal of it, but you're right, there's so much of it we do not understand.
It's fascinating.
It is totally fascinating. I mean, you talked about knowing the parameters of what happened in Victorian age. Are you worried?
Not particularly.
Why not?
Because I think this is statistics.
Right.
We have got plenty of time to prepare, to understand, and to future-proof ourselves, because such events like this, or indeed being hit by an asteroid, are going to happen.
Do you mean that we would see a Carrington event building before it happened? Would the warning signs be there?
But only a few hours.
Like your volcano guy.
So how do we prepare? In the terms of disaster movies, what do we do in the few hours that we get before the big one comes?
Well, if we had a few hours' notice and scientists monitoring the sun, which they do, said, ground everything, switch everything off, they have plans to prepare that. But these events, as I said, like an asteroid striking us, they're going to happen sometime.
Right.
But they're unlikely to happen in our lifetime.
But people watching at home, so they're not frightened, what should they be doing?
Well, if there was such a big event as this, there would be some notice. Basically, the only thing you can do at home is unplug everything. But because we've got fuses, it probably wouldn't matter much.
OK.
Of course, I'm worried about a mass extinction because this planet has had mass extinctions in the past due to asteroid activity. But I suppose
your broadband's going to go down.
Well, indeed. Well, as long as the price comes down afterwards, I don't mind. But in terms of what Elon Musk has been talking about, you know, about essentially extraplanetary adventures, first Mars, but potentially on this issue, because after all, the sun is a star and it's due itself in billions of years' time to collapse like other stars do in the universe. Is there any future for humankind outside of the solar system if the technology were there?
You're quite right. The sun is a yellow dwarf, so-called main sequence star. They are known to be long-term producers of stable energy. They are good to live next to. We are fortunate. The reason we are here is because of our stable star. And we've got 5 billion years in the future, give or take a flare, 5 billion years of stable environment. But you're right, mankind wants a long-term survival in the universe. And who knows if we might last 100 years at a long.
Sure. So Elon Musk is right to talk about Mars, is he?
We would have to go out and live somewhere else.
Right.
The problem... Well,
Mars is what he's suggesting in 5 years.
The problem is if the sun dies and the Earth dies, Mars dies as well.
OK.
But in the short term, it's possible we could go and live on Mars, although Elon Musk's billionaire dreams are unfeasible.
Why?
At the moment. Because he wants too many people to go there too quickly. He talks about hundreds of people, millions of people living on Mars in 20 years' time. Now, that might happen in 1,000 years, but not in 20 years.
Well, he suggests 5 years, actually. It's quite a short period.
It's the thing billionaires do and decide.
I think billionaires do, OK.
People in the sort of trade, so to speak, the technological trade, say that there are many reasons why he can't build a capsule to take millions of people to Mars, keep them alive on Mars, because, you know, Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids, as they say. In the trade, people say the toilet problem. Because if you've got thousands of people in a spaceship, you need a pretty good life support system to keep everybody alive, to keep everybody protected, to feed them, to, you know, make sure they're alive when they get to Mars. Then when you get to Mars, everybody will die straight away because there's nothing there to support them. So he's got great dreams. He's revolutionising the exploration of space. But his billionaire dreams about going to Mars are a big premise.
Is there a more feasible planet?
We're going to have to get into...
there isn't.
We're going to have to get into another break. I would just like to remind everyone that it is, of course, turtles all the way down. That's the real problem.
That's the problem.
Dr. David Whitehouse, that was terrific. I loved that. I could have talked about that.
Absolutely. I love it. We're all off, but not to Mars.
I love it. Well, I've got another break upon us now, after which we'll be meeting a pair of great Britons who have walked from Birmingham to London, highlighting men's mental health issues and raising money for the family of a dear departed friend. Yes. Quite harrowing. Andrew, what do you make of that? You know, two men a day taking their lives.
Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And it's important that you're talking about the industry. I know, same with doctors, same with lawyers, same with various other people in different professions. All credit to them. The more we can speak about these issues, the better it can help people. I want us to be the generation that speaks about mental illness, so the next generation doesn't suffer the stigma. And two great Britons, as you rightly say, are doing very, very well to do that.
After the break, musician Tre Lowe will be along to tell us about the platform he has set up to help men deal with mental health problems and other issues. So we're going to continue this conversation after the break. OK, now, our great Britons tonight raised awareness of men's mental health issues. And staying on that theme, our next guest is a hugely successful musician who also dedicates much of his energy to supporting men through crises in their lives. Tre Lowe is a music producer and songwriter, part of the award-winning band Architects, behind big-selling and streaming hit Body Groove. He has worked with Usher, Justin Timberlake and Whitney Houston, but more recently he has made the leap to mentoring and thrown his weight and passion behind a campaign called More Than Men. Tre Lowe joins me now. Great to have you here. Thanks for coming along.
No problem, no.
Tell me, first of all, to give it all context, your own story, because you've had struggles along the way.
Yeah, I mean, when I was 15, I was paralysed during a routine appendectomy, and I literally came out of that. I was given the antidote to that, and nothing was the same for me. I had this strange sensation where it felt like the room was, like, moving around. It was like a dreamlike sensation, and it carried on all the way. Age 25, I got into a pop band, and I had to navigate this space. So imagine 1 minute you're on top of the pops, the next minute you're getting your brain scanned. So it really got me into the world of how do you actually show up in life as a man powerfully, yet dealing with the kind of mental health challenges of being unwell and dealing with stuff? Very, very powerful experience for me.
And were you keeping it to yourself?
Absolutely. And it was on two reasons. It's not just being a man, it's also being a black man, because, you know, I was well aware of the stats in terms of black men being sort of shoved in mental places in terms of like schizophrenia, etc. So I learned quickly as a man and as a black man, do not share too much about what you're dealing with and just kind of wear a mask. Like everything's okay. Don't let too many people know. And it was a very, very challenging time.
Gosh, so you really felt there would be serious consequences were you to venture that you were suffering?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think society is necessarily geared up to have men share authentically about what they're going for. So I learnt quickly, you know, for instance, my parents walked me in the room and then the, you know, doctor will say to me, have you been actually taking anything when my parents went in the room? So I learnt very quickly, just keep quiet about what you're dealing with. Just suck it up. Almost like as a man, you know, don't complain too much, otherwise people won't take it too seriously.
And then, of course, you're a musician, and then it's tinnitus that starts to play an overweening part of your life.
Yes, that was one of the things I had. So I came out of this issue that I had in hospital, and I had tinnitus, had derealisation, I had head pressure, and all of them, to look at me, you would never tell that I had it. So I had to really navigate dealing with this stuff, and no one could actually see that I was dealing with. And tinnitus was one of the hardest ones because, of course, as a musician, I mean, can you imagine having tinnitus and trying to navigate the world? So it's just really learning to deal with the mental health side of it, not sharing it with everyone and just suffering in silence, really.
And you must, for people who were looking on at, you would think that you just had what they wanted.
Yeah.
You're a musician, you're talented, you've got success, you know, you've got that level of adulation, but all the time inside your head you're thinking, but it's hell in here.
And that, you know, the funny thing about the music business as well, it's like, you know, you're on this pedestal and it seems like your ego and stuff would allow you to shine, but it's actually the opposite things that happen. You know, suddenly you feel like all your insecurities are amplified. So every insecurity I had was actually amplified by that success, but yet you've got to go up and sharp as though everything's okay. Very, very challenging.
So at what point and after how long did you, I don't know, step into mentoring? When did you decide that you weren't just going to deal with your own demons, but you were going to exercise them for other people?
Good question, because for me, I learnt real quickly, suffering must have a meaning, and I know it sounds crazy to say that, but there is a reason why we suffer, and I think we suffer in order to make a difference in the lives of other people. So I quickly learned, I've been given this suffering for a reason. If I can navigate it, I can teach others. Because even with tinnitus, I'll have people who would call me up and say, Tre, I'm really suffering with it. And I had to have them navigate through what was a very, very challenging condition. So I thought, I could actually use my pain to make a really big difference in the lives of other people. So it was a very natural progression to go from being a musician to being a mentor that actually impacted other people's lives.
Tom, well, like Andrew, you've both been on this couch with me, you know, numerous occasions, and we've often had guests come in and talk. What strikes me is how often it's trauma and hardship overcome is the making of people in so many ways. You know, what if people have the demon inside? Once they confront it, it has a great benefit having had that and confronted it.
And it's also people in the public eye as well, isn't it? So what's great, if you prick me, do I not bleed? If you tickle me, do I not laugh? And you work on that sort of premise. It is extraordinary.
Yeah, but what really interests me, though, at what point, though, do people, as you say, who have often these hidden traumas, hidden disabilities, do they come forward and talk about them? I mean, I grew up in foster care. My father committed suicide. I left school with no qualifications. It's only in the last 10 years I've been able to talk about that journey. It's why I'm involved in a charity that supports care leavers, for example. You're doing something very similar here, where for many years you almost sort of have to hide that trauma. And what, in the case of tinnitus, it's like a disability that you're having to deal with in your profession. And I say that because we sort of live in a world now where people look cynically at those who say, oh, well, you're playing the victim card, you're trying to get a career progression. And I've got to be honest, sometimes I've got some sympathy with that view because I sort of, I don't think people should be defined by their childhood, by their background, by what happened in their family, no more than you should be defined other than for being a fantastic pop star, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And so, it's that balance. When you advise people, how do you advise them to be obviously authentic and honest and upfront? But the truth is, people are often discriminated against for some of these mental illnesses.
The thing is, it's about being authentically straight with yourself and what's actually going on, isn't it? It's really easy to just, not take it too seriously. You have to think, you know what, if I don't deal with this, who is going to deal with it for me? So you then have to just find a way to navigate it and share authentically. And for men, it's just such a challenge for men to do
Tre,
that.
what is the ethos of this? I mentioned More Than Men. What is that?
So More Than Men came from a room that I ran on Clubhouse. It was during the lockdown, and it was about giving men a voice to share what they were dealing with. That was all it was about. And, you know, even when we started the room, the amount of people that tried to shut the room down because they're like, men, it's all right for men. You guys are, you know, all right, patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, men are dealing with stuff. The amount of people whose relationships broke down during that time. So it was just giving men a chance to share what was going on for them. And that's why one of our first focus is relationships, because for men, you know, dealing with relationships was impossible for men to deal with, the breakdown of it. You know, I think something like 75-80% of relationships breakdowns are initiated by women. And for men, it was really, really challenging dealing with that. These were strong men. Strong men dealing with, wow, I've just lost my kids and I've lost my wife, and some men were suicidal. Some men were Navy SEALs. It was crazy to think about what men deal with and what they had to deal with in silence, you know?
It does make it worse, doesn't it, when you're in the public eye or you're a Navy SEAL because you're supposed to be big and butch and not have these feelings. What advice do you give people?
The first one is just be authentic about what's going on. You have to be. Be really authentic about what's going on and how it's actually impacting your life. That's the first thing. The second thing I think for men is actually to find other men to be with. So More Than Men is about brotherhood, letting men share with other men, because it's not always safe for men to share with women, you know? Men are encouraged to be, you know, vulnerable, etc. But for men, that sounds like weak. Oh, my God, my armour's going to come off. So find other men that you can share with, be authentically straight, and do the work. I always do this. Rather than doing that, do this. Do you know, what can I be responsible for? How can I grow? Do you know, how can I change the situation?
Where can people find you? Where can people find More Than Men and make contact?
So www.morethanmen.com. Please get in touch with anything that you've been dealing with, that you're finding it really challenging to navigate in your life, you know, for men. Please definitely get in touch.
Excellent stuff. Tre Lowe, thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming in. Couldn't be a more important issue to talk about.
Good to see you.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll maybe stay in touch and hear more about it.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Now, a subject genuinely close to my heart is that of apprenticeship. I think an apprenticeship is just a wonderful opportunity. And this week, just past, has been National Apprenticeship Week. It makes so much sense to me to ensure time-honoured skills and professions are passed from generation to generation. And then there's the obvious point that training in practical skills is for many young people far more appealing than the thought of academia, which is so readily pushed at everyone now. So my final guest tonight is a prime example of apprenticeship and the success therein. Mia Tamburrini is now a level 3 advanced butcher, skills that I can only envy. Hi. Thank you for joining us. No, it's lovely. Seriously, I'm not blowing smoke here. I really value the very idea of apprenticeship. Congratulations and well done.
Thank you.
What does it mean to be a level 3 advanced butcher? What can you do?
It means a lot, personally. I can, you know, so I started with my level 2 retail butchery. That's sort of teaching you the basics, how to do, like, breakdown of full carcasses. Level 3 is more to do with, like, management, running your business, looking into, like, food standards, a bit more, like, general safety of food management.
What attracted you? I mean, male or female, I'm not sure how many people think instinctively of going into the butchery trade. What was it for you?
I actually started on a Saturday as a Saturday girl. A dear friend of mine is actually a butcher who actually was then my trainer, Crosby Management Training. She got me started on a Saturday and I was at sixth form and I just didn't feel it was the right path for me. Really found a passion that I hadn't felt for quite a long time at school. And I just decided, you know, I think this actually could be quite a good career path. And
how was it, you know, when you were confronted? How do they break you into it? You know, you say you can break down a whole carcass.
Yeah.
You know, what do you start with? Do you start with a little rabbit? And then work up? What do you do with you?
So you just think, like, you learn about the general anatomy itself of the animal. You're working with... I have personally worked with some of the best butchers in the UK. And I think that you just... Working in the environment with the shop, you pick up day to day, like, how to just do general things within the trade itself, I suppose. So
yeah. Tom, it's dear to your heart as well, isn't it? The whole concept of, you know, within your education remit, the apprenticeship.
Absolutely,
matters.
yeah. In terms of my day job, and of course National Apprenticeship Week's been around, I think, 16 years now. And it's important, isn't it, as a country, Neil, that we do celebrate these wonderful success stories, because actually for so many years now the narrative, and we're all guilty of it, you know, that success is somehow a clutch of GCSEs and A-levels and off you go to university and you're going to earn all this money when you graduate. Well, of course that sort of perspective has broken down. Yes, it's the right route for some, it's not for others. And what I'm really passionate about is that we have a post-compulsory education and skills system in this country that meets the needs of 100% all of our young people. You know, Switzerland sends 2/3 actually of its young people from school into quality apprenticeships. We've just heard of a fantastic apprenticeship here. Frankly, in those areas of skill and mastery and competence, I think you qualified a year ahead of time as well, didn't you? So you passed your endpoint assessment. That's just like, you know, passing your driving test 6 months early or something. So great credit to you. It just shows how brilliant you were with the mastery of those skills. But the truth is, we're not opening up enough opportunities for young people who want to go through that route. UCAS, which is the university sort of central register, opens about 700,000 accounts every year for young people, Neil. 300,000 of them say, I want to do a degree apprenticeship. I'd rather do the learning and earning route rather than do the, what I call pay and pray route, where you borrow £54,000 off the government over 3 years and you're not sure you're going to get a job paying more than national minimum wage at the end of it. So, you know, I've had these discussions with the skills minister. We've got to do more, I think, in this country to open up more routes, but particularly those skilled learning and earning routes, so that we're not saddling young people, a generation of young people, with debt.
Are you learning and earning now? Have you now got a job in butchery?
Yeah, so I've been employed since I started my level 2.
That's the thing, yeah. Employed from day one, aren't you?
Yeah, so,
yeah. So, you know...
And obviously veganism and the rest is on the march, but is butchery as a trade, there's still plenty of work out there for someone with your kind of skills and aptitudes?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Obviously, veganism, it is happening, but I think it's just... the way the world is going, you know, it's just a big change that's happening. But I very much believe that, you know, it will be around for years, because it's a thing that has been around for years, and it will continue to be like a growing thing and something that people will support.
Andrew, it really inspires me genuinely to hear stories like this. Because that one-dimensional approach, as Tom's talking about, with education and further education, it only appeals to or it should only, why wouldn't it just appeal to a narrow band?
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right.
For the rest of that rainbow of colours of jobs and fulfilling ways to make a living, apprenticeships should be
it's brilliant, and we were discussing this in the break. There's so much going on in the break as well. What I love about it is that if you do something you're really passionate about, you'll never do a day's work in your life. And I do think that the more people can get exposed to real jobs with a career path as well. I mean, it's a brilliant testimony to you. And you had the battle scars as well, you were telling us. So you've done quite well with it. How many, I mean, in terms of women, because you don't normally associate butchery, or maybe it's changed as a profession, how many women are on your apprenticeship route as well? Do you know what the percentages are? Do you see many other female butchers?
I'm not sure on the percentage of how many women are actually enrolled on the apprenticeship scheme, but I have worked with some of the highest qualified butchers, and they are women.
Good.
So I probably know about 5 women that are qualified butchers, but you still get people coming in the shop saying, oh, you know, it's really great seeing a woman in here, and that it is seen more. And I think the fact that the public are supporting women, you know, come in and they give me really good criticism and they love to have a chat with me.
What's a good criticism? What's a good criticism of a butcher?
It's good to see a woman in a butchery, I suppose.
Yes, okay, that's good.
But yeah, I mean, it's... it's definitely
Is it not, though? I mean, as Andrew's saying, is it not a masculine environment?
Yeah.
You know, a butchery business or a butcher shop, is it not a predominantly masculine trade? Or are you saying that there's plenty of women in that as well?
I think it is yes, it is seen as being a more masculine trade, and there are still more men in the trade compared to women, percentage-wise. But I think, you know, the women that are in it are very strong. We're qualified with.
You're an inspiration, Mia. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to get to the end of the show now. But thank you so much for coming in. That's all from me on Neil Oliver Live tonight. My thanks, as always, to my panel, Tom Bewick and Andrew Eborn. Don't go anywhere, because coming right up is a GB News special report.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan